I grabbed a piece from this book over here, and then I grabbed a piece from Alex. Neither one of those were automotive. But it was business. It was systems.
Yes.
And when you start looking at it from a production to the operational side, that must be the lens that you go through, and that means you're going to have to give up. But I'm just going to come back to this again because, Taylor, I know there's people listening. That's hard to do. Hey everyone, welcome to Crossroad Conversations with the Lewis Brothers, where we aim to share real stories about running a successful family business, working through adversity, and pouring back into the community that keeps our door open. We're your hosts, Matt, Shelby, and Taylor, and we bring you relevant local business advice and automotive insights that are sure to change the way you look at running a business, and maybe even throw in a plug for you to do business with us. Welcome to Crossroad Conversations with the Lewis Brothers. Hey, we're back this week, and we got an exciting subject to talk about. Taylor, I'm excited about this one really because as we've evolved and grown as a business, we've really lived in this subject. And the subject is beyond the sale, mastering the operational side of your business.
Yes, it's really big.
That sounds easy, but when you start pulling the layers back, and I can't wait to dive into some of the details of what we've personally gone through about starting to work on the operational side and how do you have the right pieces in place that allow your business to scale with reducing the amount of times you pull your hair out. That's what I'm going to say. You know what I mean? Or trying to find a better balance of work-life balance while growing your business at the same time. Much easier said than done. We'll dive into that here in a second, but why don't you recap last week?
Hey, recap last week. We exchanged Shelby out, brought Mac back in. We shot him off, so we've got it. We're back in the middle of it here. But recapping last week, hiring versus talent or hiring versus culture. We really deep dove into that. And you got to find that happy medium because if you go too far one side or the other, it's going to disrupt your whole path of what you're on. So dive back into previous episode. That was 33. Hey, always check us out there on lewissuperstore.com for all the new, freshest deals, specials, everything online that we have to offer. Hey, what did we drive today? Well, we actually walked over to our podcast room, but new vehicle that just came out, and it's been a long time since we've had it, but I got on the showroom floor over at Ford, a King Ranch F-150. Ooh. I've talked about the Super Duty. I've talked about the Expedition, but the F-150 is really the OG, that it kind of was all in there. And it's the ultimate experience. I always talk about these, but the interior is so nice.
Oh, it's so nice. I'd have to check the facts, but I'm pretty sure the King Ranch in the F-150 maybe came out in like 02, 03. I can remember, I graduated high school in 2000, so I can remember just shortly after that going to college and seeing the King Ranch coming, and it was like, man, hey, Dad, can I drive one of those? And he was like, no way. And I'm like, at least I'm going to go sit in it. So I'd sit on the lawn, and it would have that saddle-like leather, and when you open the doors, it just smelled different. Yeah. It's just something that feels like a higher level when you get into a King Ranch F-150.
Oh, it does. I was pulling it in the showroom the other day and put level kit and tires on it so it looks good. But just the stigma around it, everything, the finishing, awesome truck. You got to come check it out on the showroom.
You bet you do. Okay, let's dive right in today. I talked to you about, hey, today we're going to get in the weeds, and there's probably some listeners out there that are in this situation. There might be some that are in it and don't even realize it, or others that realize it, but they're like, I understand I'm stuck. I don't know how to get out of this. I don't know how to take the next step, and I'm here to tell you, we've been there. And in multiple areas, we're still there. My biggest piece of advice before I get into the details is make sure you're listening to people, whether it's a podcast like this, or you're reading a book, or you're investing in a seminar, to people that are where you want to go.
Yep.
No matter where you're at in life or in business, you got to make sure that where you're gathering information from and the people you're surrounding yourself are not where you currently are, but where you want to go. And I found myself looking outside the automotive business, and I think that's a tip before we get even farther into this, is business.
Yep.
And Taylor, one of the things we found is, forever we had studied automotive. And we started finding ourselves looking in the restaurant industry, looking in the hospitality industry, we were in the construction industry too, but looking at all these different industries, and there's more crossovers than you think.
There is.
And the amount of businesses that I talk to and business owners that are like, yeah, but mine's different and this and that. If you'll get out of the forest and really peel it back, it's processes and people and what systems have you put in place. So when we started looking at that going, hey, how do we scale our business? What different systems do we put in place? We had to look to mentors outside, many of them not in the automotive industry, to figure out what do we put in place? How can we learn from them to be able to scale up? Now, many of you, especially if you've started a business or you've worked in the same industry, you get caught in this area. And I'm going to walk you through no different than we have ourselves, whether it's in sales in our business or if it was, as a technician or changing oil or a parts counter person, is you get in the middle of a production role. So let's take sales, for example. In sales of selling the car, being out there, prospecting yourself, working on your own customer database, really working on you and your production, because that's what you were in control of. And a lot of startups are that way too. You're the one knocking on the doors, making the calls, doing the estimates, checking the work, so on and so forth. And your business explodes because you have passion, because you're part of it and you're part of the production. But then as it goes on and you get past your bandwidth or your capacity, you start to hire somebody.
Yeah, you've got to bring some people on because you're hitting the rev limiter and you realize one of two things. The biggest thing is, one, I can't scale past where I'm currently at if I don't get any help. And two, it's the quality of life, because a lot of people start to get into there of like, I can do this, I can be in the middle of it, but I can't scale, and then it doesn't allow me to be able to decompress and step back every now and then. So then you bring someone on. You start bringing any people on to help you in different areas. Then kind of what happens whenever you move on from there is you have to start more into a quality control aspect than necessarily of you knocking on the door every single day.
You bet. And one of the things, and I'm guilty here, so I'm not sitting here talking like that I've got it all put together. I'm just going to tell you where I've failed and where I've learned from. And anytime I have a setback, or I'm not going to call it a failure, but maybe it didn't go exactly how I wanted, I always look towards, no matter what the industry, let me find somebody else that had success out there and let me learn from them. We're smart enough to know that. We don't have any doctorate degrees, but we're smart enough to know, hey, we can go learn from those people that have the doctorate degrees or their masters or their MBAs, or that have maybe just been down the path that we're going, and we could learn from them. So one of the things that happens is you get to a point where you start hiring people on to help increase your sales, increase your production, whatever it may be. And when you do that, you find yourself in this middle ground of like, I know I hired on 3 people or 2 people to help multiply the output of our business, but you're still like, your foot's still in it. Yeah. Like you find yourself still stepping in going, no, here's how you do it. No, here's how I did it. And you're like, are they doing the production or am I doing the production? And many of us get there, we're in the middle of trying to do the splits, which we can't do. Yeah. All right. And it builds up frustration, and a couple of things happen. Burnout on yourself, higher employee turnover, because you're just not empowering them and letting them go. And I know you've experienced that too, where we've been caught in the middle of it, and you keep injecting yourself in to make it work right, but you need to empower the others. It's really tricky.
Very tricky of going into that. And I ran across this the other night of one of the processes that we had set in as far as sales and growing and realizing and laughing of, our going through the process of the sale, but laughing about why has this gotten so difficult? It's not necessarily that it's gotten difficult. Our business has evolved because it's grown so much. It's grown so much in the last year. And no different than the principles, practices, everything we've done that has got us here. We have to remember that's deep-rooted and that keeps our culture, but it's okay to adapt and change that, because without doing that, you're not going to necessarily be able to scale. And so I sat back and was like, oh, man, you're right. And a couple of the other managers looking around me, I said, Taylor, that's just part of growth. That's part of growth going. And I said, I understand. But my fight with it is, and they said, no, I know your culture and you and your brother's culture. That's what you want to keep and you want to grow and everything else. I said, but you've got to look at this other. So having people around you that feel comfortable enough to be able to coach and push you, that's so important.
It really is. And I mean, I can't tell you how long I fought it, and I still fight it, because it's because you have passion and it's because you've had success in doing the production, and that got you to where you currently are. So if you're in a management role, if you're in a supervisor role, and you're not in a large company that can teach you how to keep making those micro steps and empowering others, and you're probably listening to this because you're part of a small business, is how do you take that next step? And I'd find myself, and it'd finally get to about a breaking point, where nobody else really saw, but behind the scenes, it's like you're just sitting there at your desk at the end of the day or on your drive home going, why can't I figure this out? Well, why am I absolutely just toast? I like what I do. My employees are fantastic. We got great culture, but holy moly. And I get the ramp up period. Like, let me just tell you this. Like, even with our business, we've been in business for 79 years. When we moved and we started scaling again, I don't know about you, but to me, it almost felt like we were starting a new business.
It was.
I mean, it just, we're not done there yet. And I can remember that. And then about 90 days passed, and I was like, I didn't really expect this. No. And it was like, okay, well, let's peel back the layers. What needs to be fixed here? How do we need to empower others? And just as soon as I thought I had empowered people, there was a whole new level. And we're on our journey there. I'm not telling you right now we've even figured it all out, but we're on our journey to be able to get that. I got to talk about a turning point where this finally hit home with me.
Yeah.
Because and so are you. It's just kind of how we were growing up. Is we work and we work hard, and when we hit an obstacle, we just work harder. We just put the time in, and we just like put the load on me. I can carry it. And it's like, hang on, there's got to be a smarter way. So I'm reading a book, and this was a couple years ago when I read this. It's called The Motive. And in the book, The Motive, they talk a whole lot about, they compare a couple different CEOs of large companies and the two people that were going down the same track. And, both of them had this outside mentor and leadership coach. And they start talking about what you're doing to be able to scale. And one of the things that stuck with me there, real simple thing, was you have to fire your old self to be able to get to the new levels. Yep. And I rewound that part a couple times because I'm listening to it, whether I was running or driving in the car. And I was like, I got to fire my old self to be able to get to where I want to go. And it was kind of controversial for me because I was like, if I fire the person that got me to the success level, that got my employees to the level of success where they are now, are you sure that's really right? Okay. But what they really meant is, and as I read more into the book and I listened and I dissected that, is you have to create the capacity and the time to be able to work on your new role and your new systems. And the only way you can do that is about removing stuff from the past. Mm-hmm. You can't empower others if you're still trying to step into the middle of helping them to do their job. But man, is that easier said than done.
Very, very difficult. And you've probably went through it before myself or Shelby of learning and going through that process. But you hit the nail on the head. Whenever you feel like your wheels are spinning, a lot of times at the end of the day, you can go back and look and you can say, well, okay, let me break down what I've went through throughout the day. And every day that you are absolutely spun out, it's a day we probably went and looked over things that we shouldn't have looked over.
Yeah.
Now, don't hear me wrong there. You need to go back and always quality check every aspect. But on a day-to-day basis, it should not be of your daily routine that you're going in and still doing things from your old self from years ago, because that is not enabling you to be able to expand to a new self.
And I'll tell you this, if you don't tell your time and your schedule what to do, it'll tell you what to do. And here's what I mean by that. It doesn't matter if we work 9, 10, 12, 14, 16 hours in a day. There's enough stuff coming at us, it'll fill the whole day. So it's never an issue of, will I have enough to do today? It's more of prioritizing as a leader. And, on the business side of operations, of prioritizing where I can get the biggest X factor. And that has just been ringing in my mind. And it's this filter that I mentally go through is, if I take this meeting or if I put this small group activity together, what kind of X factor could it equal? Versus me just working on something independently. And if you go back a couple episodes, you'll listen to where we talked a whole lot about, and I started talking about rescheduling my day. And I learned this from Alex Hormozy. He said, he doesn't schedule anything in the first half of the day that doesn't have to do with his business and his leaders and his managers. He said, I'm not meeting with outside vendors. I'm not meeting with anybody on the outside that's not helping me X factor the inside. Sure. Now, do you need to meet with those? Sure, we got plenty of reps we need to meet with, but those are scheduled for the afternoon. And why are they the afternoon versus the morning? The morning is when your brain's the freshest, you have the most energy, you can use the most attention to detail that's needed. And why would you spend that on outside sources? I think that's so important. So I'm telling you about, I grabbed a piece from this book over here, and then I grabbed a piece from Alex. Neither one of those were automotive. But it was business. It was systems.
Yes.
And when you start looking at it from a production to the operational side, that must be the lens that you go through, and that means you're going to have to give up. But I'm just going to come back to this again because, Taylor, I know there's people listening. That's hard to do.
That's so hard to do. There's a really good point you just went over that I want you to go back and say. What did you say about your day? Prioritize your day, or what?
You need to prioritize your day, or the time, the activities in there. It will prioritize your day.
Okay, so I love that. We were in a meeting yesterday, and this is where you hear little bits and pieces. We were in a meeting yesterday. Matt was running the manager meeting, and then I ran the sales meeting afterwards. And so we were going through everything, and in a lot of meetings, if you're ever listening to this and you're running a meeting, you have people that are really engaged.
Sure.
You have people that look like they're still asleep. You couldn't throw a pot of coffee on them and get them excited. But I went back into that. We were halfway through the meeting, and I said, you know what, guys? I said, let's prioritize our day. And I said, how do we prioritize it, and how do we remember things? They're like, oh, write it down. I said, great, everybody write it down. So half of them did. I went back, and I was like, no, write it down. I'm coming around. You're going to tell me how we're going to get to this step, how we're going to get to your next goal. So we wrote it down. Fast forward to in the afternoon, I actually hear a guy that never follows through with the process because he wrote it down. He's coming back around to the manager to check on it. And I'm like, boom, that hit home. That made sense. That's why you do that. So that's so important of what Matt said. Prioritize your day. And it doesn't matter if it's in a spreadsheet, on a big chief tablet like you doing. Yep. Whatever works for you is going to help you drive the day.
That's such a great point. I hope the leaders out there hear this. And we learned this early on in our career. And then, we share all this information to just help each other grow as brothers. But, you do less with more impact. So on that meeting like that you were going over yesterday, it's not, hey, can I cover 10 different subjects? It's no, can I cover a maximum of 3? And while I'm reading the audience or my employees, if they're not engaged and they're not writing down, I'm stopping. I'm going back over, write it down. I'm coming to inspect it like you just talked about. Okay. So then you'll get the multiplication factor later.
Yes.
And so many people I listen to, especially early on in their career, and they just stand up and they talk and they go over so many subjects and they think they killed it and they got no role playing and they didn't pause and they got no cadence. Now, they were fired up and everybody comes out of the meeting going, man, they were jacked up. It's going to be a good day, but they can't remember what they talked about because they went over too much. Yes. And I'm just telling you, you may be uber successful out there, but I'm telling you, there's another level. There's always another level, but you can't ever see it if you don't step back, look at the operational side of it, look at your systems in place, and it's okay to evolve.
Yes.
It's okay to remove something in your business that's keeping you from where you need to get to. I love being able to use it as an example with our employees and our customers when we talk to people about how we've grown and what's our next step. As I said, we were a wildly successful company. We really are. Family-owned company, 4 generations, 79 years, wildly successful. And that success got us to where we are now. It enabled us to build a 26-acre campus with 150,000 square feet, you know. But those systems, not all of them, but a lot of them, were not built to scale on where we're going. So again, that's at the operational side. We could have just put our head down and just continued to grind it out from what we had always done. But we said, no, we got new layers. We need new people. We need new processes. And we've got to look at this from an operational standpoint. You know, and I think I'll go over one other piece here. We're in the retail business, so like it's so much less structured than if you were on an assembly line.
Yes.
You know, and you do A and you do B because you got so many variables coming in. But our managers, we talk about this at the start of every single day. Right? You got to treat it a little bit like an assembly line to make sure you go around and all your machines are turned on. You don't have any breakers that you've got we call tripped. You got to go flip the breaker. And then that means, are you coaching or are you leading your staff to make sure they're doing the daily activities, again, in the morning, so we get the multiplication factor all day long? You can only do that if you evolve as a leader to the operational side.
Yep.
You know, to the operational side. So that's some rain. I know we got more to dive into there, but we got to get to our automotive fun fact of the week.
Yep.
This day in this month in history, in the automotive dealership business, what critical financial metric is often used to assess the efficiency of turning vehicle inventory into sales revenue and is a key indicator on how well a dealership manages its inventory? Is it A, gross profit? Is it B, net profit margin? Is it C, inventory turnover rate? Or is it D, customer satisfaction index?
That's pretty good. I think majority of the listeners that are not in this are probably going to go straight to, I'm going to give you one that it's not, and they'll narrow it down for you, but gross profit margin.
They would I think they'd go straight there.
Straight to that.
They'd go straight to that. And
Because
we'll come back to the answer. Of course, we've talked about the answer on a whole episode, which is exciting. But we'll come back to that one.
absolutely.
That's a good one.
So, laying straight into the next part of it, laying the operational foundation, systems and processes for scalability. So, really big deal there. We've kind of already talked about rolling into that, but we've talked about realizing that, understanding that, but then stepping back and saying, hey, these are the systems I got to be able to put in to be able to move to the next level.
Mm-hmm. And so what we're after really at the core, and I know I got to relate to other industries because we've got a lot of industries listening out there. Plus, I've personally learned from a whole lot of industries. I've been studying the restaurant and the hospitality industries a lot lately. And one of the things they talk about, some of the most successful restaurants or hotels out there is how do we duplicate that wow experience? And if we start thinking about that customer that we personally walked through a sale or worked through service and they had just an amazing experience, in the back of your mind, you're like, if I could get that duplicated, it wasn't hard. We didn't give the house away to do it. But how can I take that experience that I did or my top person did and duplicate that throughout the entire dealership? And the way to do that is you start looking at your systems and you start looking at your processes. One of the things we've done, our foot's really been on the gas. If you look at last year, it was kind of two halves. Is the first half was moving, getting everything finished up, because when we moved, construction was still finishing up. And then the second half, really after the third quarter, going into the fourth quarter, was, okay, we're here.
Yep.
What new meetings, what new processes? And we started off with, a better org chart. I mean, I'll just be really honest with you. We had all this information in our head, but it wasn't on paper. Like, what is the org chart? How would I move up? Who reports to who?
Yep.
What's our ratio of manager to employees? And we started right there.
Yeah.
We studied the military a whole lot there. And if you look at the military and their rankings, you look at the maximum amount of people that somebody can manage, or to be able to lead, and it's in between 4 and 8 people. We had some areas that had a 2-to-1 ratio, and then we had some areas that were 16 or 17 to 1.
Okay.
So we first had to start right there and go, can we free up the capacity of a leader to actually do what we're talking about? Because it's one thing about doing what we're talking about, but it's two to have the capacity. And you talked about it with time. If you got a 10-to-1 ratio and you're still plugged in on doing what you did 5 years ago to get to here, you can't ever work on that new stuff.
Correct. Yeah, that's really big because once you and then you start, you don't realize that while you're in it. You're just if it's a worker mentality or anything else, I'm gonna work harder and I'm gonna do it. And you're stuck in the mud, spinning your wheels, and you're going nowhere, exhausting yourself, all because you didn't make that little adjustment to be able to help that system grow, help that system be well defined in the areas that it needs to be.
You bet.
Very important to be able to do that. And that helps you step back whenever you do delegate that to a new person to be able to help you grow there. It helps you identify other areas. So whether it be in our retail side of it, of customer service, of inventory management, of workflow, communication, all of that.
You know, so, that was kind of step one there is like get your org chart right, you know. And when I first met, I started at the general manager level wise, and then I went to GSM and then we went to service and parts, and I had them all write it out. I didn't do it for them, okay? I had them all write it out, and they brought it to me. And it was a mess at first. It wasn't perfect. Nobody's was. And then we started moving stuff around. Then I started teaching about the ratio because I first wanted to see where they were. Then they modified, they brought it back. So that was step one, getting that org chart and getting the ratio right. Step two was SOPs, so standard operating, processes and procedures. And what we would do and we're not done with all this, so don't think we have all this put together. We're right in the middle of it, so it's a great subject to talk about, is we would talk about each of the areas, and we started with our central office. And we said, okay, accounts payable, accounts receivable, deal clerks, title clerks, payroll, whoever it may be, write down, take screenshots, write out your process and the procedure for AP, for AR, for payroll. And we have digital copies, and then we got the old school 3-ring binders too. And it's got the process so we could fill a spot, whether it's a new employee or we become layered better. So if somebody goes on vacation, we can still do accounts receivable, still do accounts payable. And these were multiple sheets. Now, how do you get started there? You sit down with your employees and you have them write down what they think their job description is. A couple of things are going to happen here. One, it's going to start the process on how to put together the actually operating procedure for that position. Number two, it's going to help identify what they think their job is versus what you hired them to do. So you start there, and then you start listening out. This goes back and forth. And what you're developing there is an actual process so you can train somebody else, cross-train, so it can layer. Or two, to make sure when somebody new gets hired, that you're training them on the correct process. Because that's the other thing we've seen is maybe we hired somebody and we know that we got it all right for what they want them to do. But then you hired a sales manager that then hired a salesperson. They're now training them. And what if they interpreted or missed a couple of the steps? And then another one down the road, then they're trained on something totally different that you and I didn't even talk about.
Yeah, they shot way off to the left over here, and you thought we were going straight down the road, completely off to the left. So that was so big to be able to do, because if you're not putting that the next person to step in the right capacity role, and you're not helping them, guiding them to be able to do, it just completely throws them off. The other part of loving putting all this, the whole structure in of all the job titles and everything else, not only does it give structure to what I'm supposed to be doing, you know what we found a lot of? This is from us being in the spots we're in, but of someone, say, that was of whatever level they are at, that a completely different department, they're coming and reporting and asking a manager in the sales department.
Yes.
Maybe someone that is the shop cleaner that takes care of anything, they're coming all the way over. Or even a lot porter that is taking care of the whole lot. They're coming and reporting. Myself, I know of being in GSM spot at Ford, when I need to be managing my other managers, they were coming over to me. No different than when I would go over to the CDJR side. So putting the workflow chart in there is not to say, now, don't take this to me of saying you can't ever come talk to me, because I am not that type of manager, nor will I ever be, of in the operational side of it. But that's taking time away from you. It's robbing time and efficiency of you being able to work if that's not set with your proper systems, procedures, and processes.
Yes.
They're coming to robbing time from you. Whenever I'm not trying to be mean, and a lot of people say, hey, don't be a dick about it as far as coming to it or anything else. You're not being about that.
Yeah.
It's about the processes, procedures, and putting it in place.
That's such a good point, but it's a slippery slope. So let me give you a couple tips on what Taylor just went over. Is you have to make sure, especially when your offices, like if you ever come into our sales manager office, all the managers are there. Yeah. Salesperson walks in or a customer walks in, they're going to go straight to Taylor because they're like, well, he's the highest position there. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He can make the deals happen. And so here's a couple tips for you if you're out there. Is number one, first listen to what they say. Okay, so you at least know what it's about before you chop somebody's legs off. Okay, and if it's, for example, if it's to work a deal, then I pause at that moment, and I'd bring them over to the sales manager, and I tell that sales manager, hey, can you help Bob work this deal? I'm right in the middle of doing some marketing to be able to generate some more leads for us. Do you have the capacity to do that right now? So first, I got to make sure that it's not a question that only I could handle. Yep. Okay, and that only takes 30 seconds to run through that filter, and then I take them over and I introduce them there, and I show that manager that I have faith in them and I'm empowering them, and then that salesperson sees that I have faith and I trust them as well. Absolutely. So that happens in every single department. You just got to know that, and if you don't address that, and I'm telling you, it's going to happen repetitively at first, but then it starts to die down. It never goes completely away. Never goes completely away. And if you find that happening more and more and more, and you've got other managers or supervisors or team leads sitting there that could handle what they keep asking you about, you need to remove yourself for an hour or two to another office. I don't care if it's the janitor's closet, so you can focus. And here's why. Because what you're working on affects your entire team.
Yes.
You know, and if you nail yourself down to just one person, there's 8, 10, 12, maybe 25, maybe 30 people that are waiting for you to accomplish that other task.
Yep.
That's the lens you've got to look through when you're in a manager role. You know,
so important, so easily missed.
It really is.
Hey, diving into our fun fact automotive quiz of the week. You know, we had talked about this of going through there, but what's the critical financial metric that's often used to assess efficiency of turn during talking about revenue, key indicator, everything of a dealership? I told you it wasn't gross profit. You thought it may have been that. It's not net profit either.
It's not net profit.
Two options there. It's inventory turn rate. We talked about how quickly can you turn inventory. And this is not just an automotive. It's in any retail aspect. How quickly can you turn the product that you are selling, you are offering to the public? How quickly can you turn it? Because the longer it sits on your shelf, the more it costs you. The quicker you can turn your inventory, the better it is for you as a business.
And you know, you could wind me up and I could just go on about that. But what I'm going to say is go listen to that episode on inventory turn. If you don't understand inventory turn and you don't understand cash flow, you don't understand business.
Yep.
I'm not trying to be ugly. I'm just saying you need to stop what you're doing right now and learn about inventory turn and learn about cash flow. That's a good one. That's a good one. We appreciate our production team putting that question in place. That was a good one for sure. Hey, next up, decoding the financial dashboard. Understanding the numbers that drive success. Okay, I'm going to lead into this one, and then I'm going to tell you how it's evolved, okay? Because we have KPIs, which are key performance indicators. Yeah. Every industry has them. You may call them other things, but, you know, the universal term is KPIs. You know, in our business, it's, hey, how many cars did you sell? How many service repair orders did you write? How many parts tickets did you do? And forever, that's what we looked at every single day. Hey, how many did you sell? How many of them were new? How many of them were used? How many service tickets did you write up? How many of them were oil changes yesterday? How many front counter? How many back counter tickets? And like, that's what we looked at, and that's what we looked at. And we understand our numbers, and we could recite the numbers. You know, we go over it daily. We have quick manager meetings with everybody in there of 15 minutes going over those KPIs.
Yeah.
You know, and then we even go deeper of how many phone calls did you make?
Yep.
You know, how many appointments did you set? You know, what were your average sales? What was your average dollars per RO? What's your gross percentage? So on and so forth. We could go over all these KPIs. But as we evolved, and this is perfect for this podcast, as we evolved, into the operational side, the shift, you reflect on KPIs. It's kind of like the scoreboard at a game. If we're in the middle of a game, you look up at the scoreboard every once in a while to see either how many timeouts you have left, how many seconds are left on the clock, what is the score, but then you don't stare at the scoreboard the entire game. You go back to putting your game plan in place. So as we've evolved to more operational, it's like, okay, those are the numbers that reflect how well we've been operating our business. We need to spend more time fine-tuning the operational side, and our output of the KPIs will be greater.
Oh yeah. No, that really changed the whole look of it, because it's not looking at this going over your monotonous task of these 4 different indicators are what's going to tell me. It's like staring at this screen telling you what's going on out in the whole business world of it, whether it be in your accounting office or out in the retail sales of it. Knowing those different metrics helps you be able to instantly look at a sheet and say, oh, I need to go check in there. I need to look in service. I need to look in parts. This is where it's really needed. My attention's needed in there right now, of being able to grab that quickly, where if you're just looking at that and saying, hey, they had many sold here, how many sold new, used, parts, service, you can't really see what side of it is. If it's getting the inventory, if it's selling the inventory, if it's the amount of people we have in that are salespeople, and so on.
That's right. But now I'll dive more into the financial side, because I know that's what I said this subject was going to be, but I'm going to help advise you as we talk about financial. I love crunching numbers, really, to be able to find trends, really to try to find opportunities. And I can tell you, earlier in my career, I would start making spreadsheets. My desk would be covered in different financial statements because I was looking for a trend. I was looking for, hey, what did we do there? What changed? What was our expense look like? What was our employee count? What was our inventories? And I'd look up, and I'm going to admit this to you. I've spent days sitting at my desk, crunching numbers till my eyes are crossed, glued, excited from what I found. And then I'll look up 2 or 3 days later, and I'm like, I found that information. It was good data. But what'd I do with it?
Yeah.
What'd I do with it?
Yes.
Nothing. I did nothing with it. I was proud that I gathered it all. I was proud, but sometimes you exhaust yourself with all the numbers to the point of your normal tasks get backed up, and then you don't even get to do anything with the numbers.
Yes.
Now, how we've evolved there is I now have some people I can lean on to that can gather that information for me. So then my brain is clear, and I've got that energy back that then I can take the ball from there to put a game plan in place to actually use it to help move the business. So that's just a personal story of mine of where I used to do all that, and I could get somebody now to duplicate it. But that's hard to let go of.
Very hard to let go, because you're letting someone else be able to help you with a task. But then going back up to one of our previous section of you growing into the next level of expanding, firing your old self, realizing that, hey, I've got to change if I'm going to be able to move, because what that's allowed you to be able to do is get that information. And I've seen a whole lot of that come out in manager meetings, that it is, hey, this is a quick scope of what we did. And then it's allowing them to be able to dive in, which then helps them manage their team better, more effectively, on a day-by-day basis.
That's right. And I think that's a goal of ours. We've tried to evolve in the manager meetings is providing that information, go ahead and dissect it and help them identify trends, but then say, I don't need you to dig any farther into this. You just take it and move the needle, And I think when you talked about, evolving as a leader, I just love this quote by Craig Groeschel. He talks about everybody wins when the leader gets better. So you're constantly trying to get better, because the rest of your team, it doesn't just affect you. It affects everybody that you influence in your business. So back on the financials, you got to understand the financials, and they've got to be a part of your business. So the same thing, whether it's profit and loss or balance sheet, whatever it may be, one of the things we really look at are our heat sheets. And like our business is a cash-eating monster. I mean, a cash-eating monster. And there's fruit from that, but if not handled correctly, it'll bury your business. And I can remember, and you'll probably remember the text a couple weeks ago, that we were coming out of one of our last weekends of the month, and it was a Monday morning. And I can tell you there wasn't much money in our account because we had had a massive weekend. A massive weekend. And that was coming.
Yes.
We had sold 70-something cars, okay, over the weekend. 70-something cars, not to mention all the repair orders. But there wasn't a ton of money in our operating account from cash. We had to bridge this gap until all the contracts actually got cashed. And that morning, our CFO came to me, and she said, great job on the big weekend, but we need to go over this. We need to write a check for $1.7 million this morning to pay off all the vehicles that were traded in that we told the customers we'd pay off. And currently right now, there's not that amount in our account. And I said, yeah, but what about all those contracts? She goes, yeah, it's coming. It's coming. So you got to know, as a business owner, I didn't freak out. Luckily, I'd been through these simulations before. What I started doing was going, okay, I understand my financials. I understand where the money can come from, but I must take action. So I communicated with you and Shelby. I'm like, hey, go get with finance. We got to get these contracts cashed. Here's how much we got coming out of our account because we're going to pay off the customer's trade. So you must understand the financials to keep the cash moving, the inventory turning, and the business to work.
Yes, it's so important. If you don't know all your vitals, you can't. No different than Matt looking back into sports. He saw the play coming. You have to call the audible because you got to do it quick. If not, it just is like a train coming down the tracks, and she comes off the tracks, and everything behind it is just a train wreck. So make the adjustment there. Be able to call, do that. Have your key people you get a hold of to be able to pull that lever. Hey, do this, do that, and it was a smooth transition, and it keeps running like a finely tuned machine.
It does. It wasn't an alarm we pulled off. It's like, hey, here's what we know. Keep this in the back of your mind. Go get them. My CFO and our controller, I said, okay, get up-to-date heat sheets for service, for parts, for finance, for rebates, anybody that owes us money. Our accounts, our accounts receivable, but the girls in the office aren't calling any of those accounts. And we figured it out, and you rock on. It's just a part of business. You don't freak out about it. You step up to the line. You step up to the plate. Another point there in financial is you could get to a point to where you need help and you need expert advice where you might not know. And it's, do you seek that advice or do you just keep acting like you know what you're talking about because you're embarrassed to admit that you don't know?
Well, the one side was just like, no, I got to figure this out. I got to figure this out. But luckily, we're blessed not only as brothers, but then we have dad and uncle that are on board as well. So as a quick, if you had to go back and say, hey, what would you do here really quick to be able to sound against, and you have those key people that are your outside influence, you can do that really quickly with.
I will tell you this, though, just to look behind into our family, okay, is if I don't ask my dad or my uncle, they're not going to tell me.
No.
They're gonna make me ask.
Oh yeah.
And so I've learned that, which has been good. It's been good. Is I know that we're a part of different what they call 20 groups in the automotive industry. So we have other people that we can look to for advice there. But I'll tell you, even within our departments, one of the success stories that we've had this past year are what we call these micro meetings. And these micro meetings are department-based between our entire automotive group, where we get all the parts managers or all the service managers or all the finance managers or all the sales managers in a meeting. Our CFO's in there, our office controller's in there, and we talk about different things. That has brought up, we have multiple different managers that after one of those meetings has gone and sat down, not necessarily with me or you, but gone and sat down, or not our CFO, but our controller, and said, hey, will you please explain this part, where these numbers come from? Because they knew they needed to move them, but they needed to better understand what goes in and out of that account, and then how can I affect that?
Yes.
So the better understanding, you must understand your financials if you want to be able to move the mark and not just keep lobbing stuff in there and hope there's something in the bank account and there's not. That's a big one for sure. Well, this one's been an interesting for sure.
It
So I think we need to go to help the listeners here. So think about this I want to talk about takeaways before we go into frequently asked questions. So takeaways today, and I'll ask you here in just a minute, and then I'll jump in after that, on really making the adjustment and mastering operational side of your business versus what you had done in the past.
My biggest takeaway that I love that you went over is knowing that you need to grow. And so you're enabling others around you, and how you do that of being able to do is exactly how Matt had talked about that I spoke about in the sales meeting of it doesn't matter what level you get into of what your role goes into. You've got to plan out your day or it will plan you and you'll go in the complete wrong direction. So knowing of dedicating those other tasks to different managers, different department heads, putting that in there so you can grow, but knowing that I still have to plan my day out. Because if not, even though I'm trying to delegate and do these other things, I still love being a part of the sales and the daily activity, and I'll sit there and grind that all day long. But if I don't plan that out,
yes,
I lose that efficiency of a day.
I think that's a great point. And I think if you plan your day correctly, you can do both.
Oh, yeah.
If you plan your day correctly, you can do your operational task in the morning. You can get that stuff done. And then in the afternoon, that frees that up where you're in the middle.
Yep.
You can go appraise a trade. You can say hi to customers. You could do a one-on-one coaching session with somebody as long as you plan that correctly. Hey, I got 3 for you here in these order that we've been going through, and hopefully it'll help you as well. Number 1, start with your org chart. Within your org chart, try to make sure your manager to employee ratio is correct. We find 4 to 8 people depending upon what the department is. Number 2, standard operating procedure with each area. So you've got that written down in digital and a physical copy to make sure that your new employees are getting trained how you would want them to do that position. And then number 3, the planning of not only your day, but if you're over managers, managers bring back to me, hey, give me your day and your weekly schedule. What does that structure look like? When are you prioritizing time with your team? And you've got to plan that out, just like you said, or it'll plan you, for sure. And you can do both, but you must prioritize where you get the most fruit. And that means pruning stuff you did in the past. You got to cut it off if you want new growth. That means firing the old you and hiring the new you to get you to a new level. So this has been a really good one.
Yes,
this has been a good one for sure.
It has.
So any frequently asked questions you've been hit with this past week?
Hi, it is during, we just finished up the Ultimate Challenge and we're getting into, and this is probably the most fun. We as 3 brothers get to go and we have these big prize auctions we do for our employees. But right now they're asking about how you're figuring out or how many TVs or how you're doing that or this. So it's been so much fun of explaining to them what's really going to happen. And so I love that aspect of it of that your employee cares enough that what you're doing and really that they're involved in the whole aspect of it. So.
Yeah, that's gonna be a whole lot of fun, and we love celebrating in the culture with our employees. Absolutely. Hey, thanks for tuning into this week. This has been a great episode on mastering the operational side of your business. As always, hey, if you would, go ahead and review these podcasts. It helps us out, and it means a lot to us. Leave something in the comment if you want us to cover. We want to cover the subjects that you guys are struggling with or that you need some help with out there in the business world. Find us on any of your podcast areas. Make sure to like, share, comment. You guys have a great day.
Hey, thanks for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to give it a like, share it with your friends and family, visit our website, and send us some questions. We want to know what you'd like to hear, who you'd like to hear from, and what you want to see, or maybe even some questions for us to answer about either the automotive industry or just business in general.